Despite having Patrick Waugh behind the bench from day one of training camp, the New York Islanders continue to struggle to hold leads. We'll talk about what's behind it, what they can do about it, and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You could start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So much to discuss on today's show. We're going to start off with, the problem that has plagued this team all season. And we're, still kind of at the beginning of this season, but, after 8 games, this problem, which was a huge problem last year and kind of the year before, continues to plague the New York Islanders, and that is not being able to hold a lead. And realistically, we saw it in both games over the past weekend. Friday night, the Islanders were up against the Devils. The Islanders led 1-0. They led 2-1. They led 3-2. And each time they ended up losing that lead before finally winning the game in overtime on the Bo Horvat goal. And the tying goal by the Devils, Jesper Bratt, came with a little less than a minute and a half left in regulation. So that one stung. We know Saturday, within the first 11 minutes of the game, the Islanders were up 3-0 on the Florida Panthers, the defending Stanley Cup champions. Well, the Islanders blew that lead as well, gave up 6 unanswered goals, and fell. Unfortunately, this is just the same old story when it comes to the New York Islanders. And we've seen this issue come up last year. We saw it come up a little bit the year before. But here we are, 8 games into the season. And in 4 of those games, half of the games, the Islanders ended up losing a lead. They had leads against Utah in the season opener, ended up losing that game in overtime. Against Montreal, a game they ended up winning in the long shootout. Islanders were up 2-0. Islanders were up 3-2, give up the tying goal with a little more than 2 minutes left. Overall, this team continues to struggle to hold a lead. And, last year, it was 23 games out of 82 where the Islanders lost after taking a lead. And that doesn't even include games they ended up winning, whether it was an overtime or a shootout. Well, not too many in shootouts, but again, it was a problem last year. It was a big problem. And the mantra around the organization was, hey, Patrick Waugh, he came in mid-season. What was he coaching the last 37 regular season games? Not easy to implement a new system. He's going to straighten out some of the issues, the zone exits, the penalty kill. And, so far this year, there hasn't been a lot of change. So here we are. And the Islanders need to figure this out. Casey Cizikas, after the loss Saturday to Florida, we have to address this as a group. That's something that starts in here. It starts with, first off, a conversation and going over where those mistakes are and what we can do better, but it's something that we've got to figure out. And I'll be honest with you, this is something everydayers, people who have been regular listeners of this show for a while know we've been addressing on this podcast for more than a year now. And, you know, I thought, okay, you bring in a new coach, Patrick Roy, things would change. But I think the bottom line is this. This Islanders team, still stuck in the muddy middle as far as the NHL goes. They are not more talented than most of the teams they play. They're not super less talented, but they're not more talented. They are an average to slightly above average NHL team. They lack team speed, and they lack elite puck-moving players, with the possible exception of Matthew Barzal. Maybe Mike Riley is pretty good at moving the puck. Noah Dobson, good at moving the puck, but not smart with moving the puck all the time. But the lack of speed and the lack of elite skill players kind of adds up to this. In order to win a game and hold the lead, the Islanders have to play smart, disciplined hockey for a full 60 minutes. And whether it's because of age, whether it's because of poor coaching in the past, whether it's because of a lack of that elite talent that we've spoken about, I think this problem goes beyond Lane Lambert or Patrick Roy or Barry Trotz. I think this problem ultimately boils down to this team needs to be perfect, and they're not. So there are going to be breakdowns. There are going to be turnovers. There are going to be situations. And, you know, the Islanders hold on to these leads when their goalies and their goaltending duo is still considered among the best duos in the league. When the goaltending is good enough to bail out the mistakes, the Islanders end up winning. When the goaltending is just average or even pretty good, you know, a lot of the time these mistakes still end up in the back of the net. And I think realistically, if you cut through all the layers of what is the exit plan and whether you make the simple, smart play to pass it up the boards, whether you talk about whether this team has enough physicality, and I know everydayers, that's something we've addressed in many different ways, whether it's speed, whether it's skill, I think the bottom line is this. It's talent. This team isn't good enough to get by when it's not playing near perfect hockey. Maybe you could do that against some of the really struggling teams in the league, but when you're up against even teams that are roughly your equal, this team just cannot consistently give the effort to play a full 60 minutes. And these breakdowns are just too frequent to me. Ultimately, when you cut through all the possibilities, I think the bottom line is when you run back the same roster year after year after year with a couple of cosmetic changes each season, but when you mostly run back the same group of guys, you're roughly going to get the same results. And surprise, surprise, this year, this roster is a year older, most of the guys on this roster, than they were a year ago. And as we all know, a lot of the players on this team are on the so-called wrong side of 30 as professional athletes. And I just think that ultimately this comes down to the way this team is constructed and the way this team plays the game They just don't have the depth. They don't have the skill and the talent to be good enough to hold leads consistently. And ultimately, while coaching can improve it a little bit, and we did see, for example, last year in the second half of the year after Patrick Roy took over as coach, some improvement in this area. Bottom line, it's going to take a revamped roster to really fix this problem. And at the end of the day, with the bad contracts and the no trade clauses and the partial no trade clauses and the unwillingness of the front office to move on from guys with bad contracts, unless you free up some cap space and make some real changes, this team is going to still be in the muddy middle, and they are still going to have difficulty clearing the puck and holding leads, because that's the talent level and skill level of this team. So ultimately, you need to change the roster if you want to change the results. And, you could be 5 points better or 5 points worse than you were a year ago. And if Anthony Duclair was healthy all year long, he might be worth a few wins over the course of a season. But again, this team is not an elite Stanley Cup contender. Ask anybody who knows hockey, any scout, any general manager in this league, with the exception possibly of one, and I know who that is. He works for the New York Islanders. I don't think anybody would put the Islanders among the top 10 teams in this league right now. And ultimately, unless you can improve this roster, I don't think you're going to see significant changes in the team blowing leads. You do have to do everything you can as a coach and as a player to cut down on it. But big picture, you got to make changes if you want different outcomes. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different outcomes is the cliched definition of insanity. And I'm beginning to think that there is some insanity in the front office right now, because this team just hasn't changed, and they're expecting more or less different results from the same group of guys. All right, we have got a lot more to get to on today's show. We'll talk about some line changes that this team has made and what we should expect, how that'll affect things tonight when they face the Anaheim Ducks. We'll preview that game. And oh yeah, for today's Islanders birthday of the day, this is one of the easiest out there, but I'll give it to you easy. First overall pick in the 1973 NHL draft, captain of 4 Stanley Cup winning teams, and a Hockey Hall of Famer who Ranger fans salute at every game to this day. Let's see if you can guess who that is. We've got all that and a lot more coming up on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you could check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. And Islander fans, check out the odds for tonight's game against the Anaheim Ducks. Use your knowledge of the Islanders to make some money, possibly on FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. My favorite feature on the Game Time app is the view from your seat. You go on the app, you get a panoramic view from the seat you are looking to buy before you purchase the tickets. That way you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. So the Islanders made some changes in practice on Monday. And the big change was that Hudson Fasching was on the fourth line for the New York Islanders at practice with Kyle McLean and Pierre Engvall. Matt Martin was skating with the extras. And here's what Patrick Roy had to say before the game. We're going to give Pierre Engvall a shot tomorrow with Fasching and see how it goes. We're going to continue to experiment until we're 100% happy. The main goal for this organization is to win hockey games. And basically, he described the fact that he's not comfortable yet with the last couple of guys on this roster filling out that fourth line. So here's what, Patrick Roy said about the 11th and 12th forward spots. That's exactly what we're looking for. Guys that are going to go up against the top line and do the job. We're changing the momentum. If you're down by a goal, they're going to give you that energy, that buzz. We don't expect them to score every night, but we want them to be game changers at times. By the way, no Alexander Romanov again at practice on Monday. He is officially day-to-day. The Islanders have not ruled Romanov out for tonight's game against Anaheim. It may very well be a game-time decision, or if there's some news at the morning skate, we'll let you know about that as well. And as far as the goaltending is concerned, because the Islanders do have a back-to-back tonight and tomorrow, it'll be Ilya Sorokin against the Ducks tonight, and it'll be Semyon Varlamov against the Blue Jackets on Wednesday. So, again, we are looking at a situation where Lou Lamoriello, Patrick Roy, still hasn't found the combination he wants on the bottom six. And he says right now, I won't lie, the spots number 11 and number 12, we don't feel comfortable yet with the guys, and we're going to try until we find the guys that we are comfortable with. So far, we have seen Patrick Roy have a lot of different players. We've seen Julien Gauthier get time on this line. Matt Martin get time. Pierre Engvall get time. Oliver Wahlstrom, Liam Foudy. Obviously, Kyle McLean, Casey Cizikas has seen time on the fourth line. For a line that contains all of 3 players through 8 games, that's a lot of guys. And it is time. You would think through training camp, you would be able to settle at least who your top 14 guys are. Even if you just get your top 12 or 13, this team basically has a top 10. And again, I think it comes back to how this team is constructed, where you just don't have enough depth of scoring, enough depth of speed, enough depth of skill, and you have a lot of interchangeable parts, but you need guys who are hungry. You need guys who are going to give a consistent effort. And, whether Liam Foudy or Julien Gauthier or Pierre Engvall, all these guys have speed. They do have skill. They lack consistency and consistency of effort. And, Hudson Fasching apparently was nursing a couple of injuries. That hampered him throughout training camp. We'll see what he can do. He's got to return to his form from 2 years ago if he hopes to lock down a spot in the lineup on a semi-regular to regular basis. But realistically, somebody has got to step forward. And at some point, do we go with some of the younger guys down in Bridgeport, or, some of the guys at Bridgeport who are experienced but are not up? You still have some guys on the roster who you can use. I mean, you've certainly got, Gauthier down at Bridgeport. Frederick Karlstrom is down at Bridgeport. Foodie is down at Bridgeport. You still have Maggio, Dufour, Alex Jeffries, who's playing really, really well. There are options out there, but right now, nobody seems to have been able to claim the spot outright. And we'll see if that changes over the next few games. Next up, Engvall, McLean, Fasching. We'll see how they do. We've got more to get to on today's show. We will talk about tonight's game against the Ducks. We'll preview that for you. Plus, we'll have our Islanders' birthday of the day. It's an easy one, guys. I hope you got it. All that and more still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks basically is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today and get $50 instantly. When you play $5, you don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed, and Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday each Tuesday. Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. So again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. So download the app. Use code LOCKEDONNHL. You'll get $50 after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So the Islanders and the Ducks. And the Ducks so far on their East Coast trip, they've played 2 games at the Rangers and at the Devils, and they've lost them both, losing 2-1 to the Rangers, and then the next night, basically losing 6-2 to the Devils. Right now, the Ducks are 3-4-1, so not struggling as much as maybe some people thought they might. And the big issue, or one big issue for the Ducks right now, ironically, the only player injured and on IR is goalie John Gibson. And Gibson not there. So Lucas Dostal and James Reimer are the goalies, with Dostal starting 6 of the 8 games so far. Now, in the last game against the Devils, it was Reimer, so I'm assuming we're going to see Dostal for Anaheim tonight when the Islanders face the Ducks. The big problem for Anaheim has been putting pucks in the net. They are next to last in the league with just 18 goals, and their power play is anemic It's only hitting 7.7% of the time. That's 31st or next to last in the league. Their penalty kill, not that great either. 23rd in the league with a 75% success rate. So hopefully the Islanders special teams can get well against the Anaheim Ducks. Goals against are solid, though. They are 8th, and Lucas Dostal has been a big reason for that. Although he is 3-2-1, his goals against average 2.17. He already has a shutout, and he has a .936 save percentage. Troy Terry leading the team with 4 goals and 7 points. Some familiar names on here. Ryan Strome, the former Islander, has 3 goals and 5 points. And young Leo Carlson, also 3 goals and 5 points. So a young, not there yet team in Anaheim that the Islanders cannot take lightly. The line combinations, Leo Carlson, Trevor Zegras, and Robbie Fabry are a dangerous top line. Mason McTavish, Cutter Gauthier, and Troy Terry are the second trio. Isaac Lundstrom, Frank Vetrano, and Alex Killorn are the third line. And then the fourth line, familiar names here. Ryan Strome, as I mentioned, Ross the Boss, Ross Johnston, and Brock McGinn. On defense, Cam Fowler and Olin Zellweger are the top pair. Brian Dumoulin and Tristan Luneau are the second pair. And then Radko Gudas and Pavel Mintyukov are the third pair. The goalies, as I said, Reimer and Dostal, with Dostal expected to go tonight. And hopefully the Islanders can come up and get the job done. This is a game that the Islanders, in theory, should be able to win. You're at home. You're playing a team that is below you in the standings, that is not expected to make the playoffs. They're in rebuilding mode. Good teams, even pretty good teams, take care of business in these kind of games. Let's see if the Islanders can answer that call. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And today is the 71st birthday. And boy, does that make me feel old. Today is the 71st birthday of Islanders Hall of Fame defenseman Dennis Potvin, the native of Hull, Quebec. 6 foot, 205 pounds. He was the first overall pick in the 1973 NHL amateur draft. And I got to tell you, Bill Torrey was offered a lot to trade that pick by Montreal, by Emile Francis of the Rangers, something I talked about in my book, Shorthanded. He held on to the pick, and Dennis Potvin became the cornerstone of the franchise for the next 15 years. Had 3 30-goal seasons as a defenseman, and he had 101 points in 1978-79. Finished with 310 goals, 1,052 points in 1,060 NHL games, had 1,356 penalty minutes. Dennis Potvin also played in 185 playoff games in his career. And here's the amazing stat. The only year that he did not make the playoffs with the Islanders was his first rookie season in 73-74. 56 goals, 164 points in 185 playoff games. We'll look back at one of Dennis Potvin's more memorable games as an Islander, his first career NHL hat trick. January 25th, 1975, Islanders hosting the LA Kings at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. Chico Resch for the Islanders, in goal, Gary Edwards for LA. And Dennis Potvin wasted no time in this game, scoring an unassisted power play goal just 2 minutes and 27 seconds into the game, with Bob Nevin off for hooking. And the Islanders led 1-0. Potvin scores another unassisted goal 2 minutes and 30 seconds later. And that made it 2-0 Islanders. With the score 3-1 Islanders, Potvin completes the hat trick early in the second. Billy Harris and Clark Gillies get the helpers on that one. And then in the third period, Dennis Potvin and Billy Harris assist on a goal by Clark Gillies. Islanders and Kings finish in a 5-5 tie. 19 saves for Chico Resch. For Dennis Potvin, the hat trick. 4 points, 4 penalty minutes, and he had 3 shots on goal, so he scored on every shot he took in this game. Dennis Potvin, Hockey Hall of Famer, still saluted by Rangers fans at nearly every game at Madison Square Garden because he was that good against the New York Rangers throughout his career. He is our Islanders' birthday of the day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're back tomorrow. We'll have our key takeaways from the game against the Ducks. We'll preview Wednesday's game against the Blue Jackets, and we'll have our weekly farm report, so make sure you join us for all of that. Don't forget, if you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, send us an email, lockedonislanders@gmail.com, and if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. You could also follow the show on X @LockedOnIsles, and you could follow me, Gil Martin, on X @Ice Wars, NYRVSNYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders all year long, and I am live tweeting during every Islanders game, so join me for some instant insight and analysis, and it's great to talk Isles hockey with you, game time or anytime. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and of course, let's go Islanders.